are your postseason predictions? I still can't believe that the New York Mets knocked out the Milwaukee Brewers when that National League wildcard game ended. I asked myself out loud, what the fudgestickle sticks just happened? Those dastardly Mets did the same thing to the Atlanta Braves in game one of the season-ending doubleheader last Monday on September 30th. And now, obviously, they pile-drived the Philadelphia Phillies in game one. And in a few days, we're going to find out if they actually just upset and make the Philadelphia Phillies face plant because they were off for a whole week and move on to the National League Championship Series. I have been overall really impressed with the New York Mets because I found them competitive throughout the year. And then, of course, it came out of almost nowhere. I think it was like towards the end of June or the beginning of June that they were like, oh, this isn't a team that's waiting until 2020, never, to potentially go to the World Series. We'll see. Here's something else I found besides my predictions completely blowing up in my face. Game 2 of the American League Wild Card Series between the Detroit Tigers and the Houston Astros. Seriously, can we petition to stop ESPN from broadcasting any more baseball games? They had that horrific audio problem, I think, for like 2 or 3 innings. Why do we have to listen to their announcers? I hate their voices. It hurts my ears. They did, obviously, the very super popular in-game interviews. I think it was during the Brewers-Mets game. I think they also did the in-game interview during the Astros-Tigers games. The thing I noticed over this past opening week of playoff smorgasbord of games, the San Diego Padres genuinely look like a powerful team. This looks like a World Series caliber team. Man, they've impressed me. I haven't watched too many Padres games this past season, but that lineup, when I watched the 2 games when they handled the Atlanta Braves, that is a deep, deep lineup. And continuing with the San Diego Braves, I wish the Braves were in the National League Division Series. Continuing with the San Diego Padres, that game 1 LDS game against the LA Dodgers, you know it's the playoffs when each team uses 17 pitchers. But that was a good game. It had drama, and the Padres also had a chance at the top of the 9th inning. But man, that was a really choppy game from the perspective of the viewer. That game kind of reminds me of like a football game where they have endless penalty, where every single play ends in a penalty. That Padres-Dodgers game 1 had zero flow. I mean, there was no flow to that. It was really hard to follow. It seemed that every time a new pitcher came in from both the teams, that pitcher always came in with 2 outs. And so they would take out the previous pitcher, they'd go to commercial break. The new relief pitcher would come in. He would get somebody out, and then they would go right back to the commercial. And you're like, wait a minute, this guy just came in. Why is the inning over? And then you're like, oh yeah, right, because he came in with 2 outs. He only need to get 1 out, and he'll come back out the next inning. Speaking of commercials, there is too many commercials in the playoffs. It drives me insane. I understand you want to make more money, but in the regular season, TV commercials are 2 minutes long. In the postseason, TV commercials are 3 minutes long. And that extra minute adds up. All the commercial breaks. Like I said, if you're running out 17 pitchers every game, you have your normal in between innings commercials. It's too long. Again, it goes for a bad viewing experience. And I wonder if you could ask a computer to provide a better viewing experience for baseball postseason TV experience. Instead of having postseason baseball on like 13 different channels with announcers who do not have good voices, maybe AI can help us fix other problems in baseball, like too much rest, replays, and I get to talk about baseball and AI with our next guest. I'm happy to be joined this week by Zeus Kerravala, who is the founder and principal analyst with ZK Research. Zeus, welcome to Last Call Baseball.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate you having me on.
I'm going to ask you an existential question. Will AI take over baseball players' jobs?
I don't think it'll take over their jobs. I think it'll be highly augmented by AI. And although, there's a lot of experimenting now with metaverse and things like that, so you can simulate those things. But there's an expression out there that says you don't have to worry about AI taking over your job. You have to worry about the person that uses AI taking over your job. And I think that's true for players as well, because there's a lot of good information they can get off.
That's interesting. And obviously, if you've been living under a rock, AI obviously means artificial intelligence. I'm going to love talking to you about artificial intelligence, and of course, a little bit about baseball. And this past season, you attended a Texas Rangers game at Globe Life Field. Tell us about your experience when you entered the field, and obviously how the Rangers or even baseball as a whole is using AI, not just as you had said for players, but as us, as the consumers, the clients of these baseball teams.
Yeah, it's interesting. Before the season started, actually, I went to the San Francisco Giants media day and I asked Bill Schlau, the CIO of the Giants, how he's thinking about using AI. And he said the bigger question is, how am I not thinking about it? It's actually changed every aspect of baseball operations, from the way we deal with customers to the on-field operations to back office operations, right? And Globe Life was a good showcase for that. They had something there running called go ahead entry, which isn't available at all ballparks now, but it's available at a handful of them. And it's pretty interesting. It uses facial recognition and it syncs up with your MLB account. And so instead of having to pull out your phone and scan a barcoded ticket, it just recognizes you and greets you by name. It says, welcome, Zeus. I see you have 3 tickets. All 3 of you walk in. But then even when you get into the stadium, there's other things there, right? There's Amazon's just walk out technology, or MassGen's a technology where you have the ability, instead of having to stand in line for concessions, you just walk into a place, you grab what you want, you walk out, and camera vision figures out what you have and just charges you automatically. In fact, I've been experimenting with just walk out for years, where I've tried to fool it, pick up things, put them down, hide things, move stuff around, then walk out, and it's always right. The accuracy of it's tremendous. And then even when you're in the ballpark, when you see all that StatCast stuff up come on the screen, I was talking to Major League Baseball about this. When the ball leaves the pitcher's hand, within a few feet, it already knows exactly where that ball is going to hit. So by the time the ball hits the catcher's glove, it knows spin rate, it knows how fast the ball was going, it knows exactly what kind of pitch it was, where it's going to go. And the predictive analysis capabilities is tremendous. And Scott Gunnerman at the PGA Tour actually said this to me once. He said, artificial intelligence lets the untrained eye see what the trained eye does, right? And so when you think about what that does from a fan perspective, typically if you're a casual fan of baseball, you might see a pitch come in and you'd have no idea, is it a fastball, changeup, curveball, slider, or whatever, right? But now AI can tell you, and then it can also tell you other things, that like if with certain pitchers facing Shohei Ohtani, every time Ohtani's got a 3-0 count, he bats, he's 475 against righties or something like that. Now all of a sudden you're a little more invested because you've got some data to understand the situation, right? And so the hardcore baseball fan may know that, i.e. the trained eye, but it's democratizing intelligence so the untrained eye can have as much fun as the trained eye.
What you're talking about, it sounds fascinating, but it's also terrifying, because it reminds me of the Minority Report, the 2002 film with Tom Cruise. I don't know if you watched that, but part of it is he walks through like some futuristic mall, and all the commercials are greeting you by name, and he ultimately has to like do some kind of crazy plastic surgery to fool the security services apparatus. I am an AI tech enthusiast. I don't work in it. I try to keep up as much as I can, but just as a normal human being, just like you in this country, where when I hear about these all the possibilities that AI is bringing and will bring, part of me is like, we're sacrificing for efficiency, we're sacrificing like privacy. How does a baseball team, what are the tools that it uses to, for lack of a better word, vacuum up all the information that it needs to feed the computers, the machine learning computers for the software, to ultimately, like you had said, bring you these new tools, bring you an enhanced experience, both at home, at a stadium, or even if you're in the major league club?
Yeah, well, in all sports now, players, part of them, there's some microchip on them somewhere in the jersey, helmet, things like that. NHL has been doing it for a long time. Football players have on the shoulder pads. And between that and then camera vision, you can actually get a lot of information on exactly how players stand and their swing angle and things like that. And so you think about it from a player's perspective, from coaching, if through camera vision, if you can model out a batter's swing when he's in a groove, right? And let's say, he's hitting like 600 over the past 10 days or something like that, and then he goes in a slump. Well, you can actually create today wireframe models. Eventually, these will be full 3D rendered images of exactly how the batter was standing when he was in the hot streak and when he was in the slump. Now the batter understands that maybe he's standing, a few inches further back in the batter's box, or he's dropped his hand 6 inches or something like that, and he's not getting the power that he was, right? And so from a player perspective, you can get a lot of data to help you understand exactly why you're doing things well and why you're not doing things well. I think you can also use it just for a better understanding of pitch count and pitchers' tendencies and things like that. And it brings a whole other element to the game that perhaps we didn't have before. And maybe guys like Sparky Anderson and Tommy Lasorda could have done it with gut feel. But the game today is largely driven by analytics. I remember being in MLB's headquarters, I think it was last year, and they said that of the 10 teams that made the playoffs, 8 were really heavy into analytics. And so there's your proof point, right? It's having a big impact on the game already. And you see that across other sports as well. But there certainly is a privacy element, even from a fan perspective, right? When you go into a stadium today, you're giving up a lot of your own personal information. But I think that's, if they can give you a better experience, then I think most people would make that trade-off, right?
In technology, it's almost kind of a joke where whatever the hot buzzword of the day is, especially let's say over the last 15 years in these publicly traded companies, it's the buzzword that they have to say in their quarterly earning calls. Just off the top of my head, you think about things like blockchain, cryptocurrency, machine learning. Yep. 5G. I want to ask you later, what in the world ever happened to 5G? And now obviously we have artificial intelligence. You mentioned earlier you spoke with one of the front office executives of the San Francisco Giants, and not everyone, but a lot of people are realizing we need to invest in AI. And a lot of these companies, all these companies are for profit. Are you even able to examine like return on investment in the tremendous amount of money that it takes to implement AI in whatever your business is, in this case being baseball?
Yeah, by the way, 5G is being used in the parks today. It's a private network that's being used behind the scenes. It's the minor league parks. It's coming to major league parks. The Hawkeye system that actually measures automated balls and strikes is actually driven off private 5G. So
I'm happy to hear that, because it was like, oh, Nokia is going to blow up again, Ericsson, Samsung, and then like 5 years around the pandemic, everyone stopped talking about 5G.
So my point is on that, we stopped talking about it because it's now real, right? And I think with AI, I always know technologies have reached mass adoption when we stop thinking of the future thing or the unusual thing. And I think from an ROI perspective, I don't know if that's the right question. It reminds me a lot of the early days of the internet, where I was in corporate IT. I was a CEO at a bank, and I remember my bosses would come to me and say, we have to have an internet strategy. And I'd be like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to put statements online? Do you want to no, we don't want to do any of that. It's too risky. We just need an internet strategy. And there were companies at the time. I remember Cisco Systems published a report talking about the economic impact of the internet. Well, was it right? I don't know. The fact is that the internet is embedded into every aspect of our lives, right? There's nothing you do that doesn't really, you want to drive to the store, you turn Waze on, right? You want to go to a movie, you buy your tickets online. There's nothing you do that doesn't involve the internet. I think AI is rapidly becoming that way, that speech interface, the ability to create content, the natural language processing capabilities, all that stuff is just becoming the norm. Our kids are going to grow up with it and not know a world without it. And so you can sit here and try and measure the ROI, but the reality is you can't really run a business without it. It would put you at such a competitive disadvantage today that it would the downside of not doing it. I guess here's one way to look at it. You could say that it's risky to use AI, but I would argue it's riskier to not use it, right? And so, the downside risk of ignoring it today, I think, puts your organization, behind big time. So
I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, again, the applications of this into the air quotes real world, but in sports, specifically baseball. I think about some clubs that are very, as you had mentioned, 8 of the 10 whatever playoff teams from last year are very data analytic. I wonder what happens when it comes to a point where a forward-thinking club that is very analytically driven and they take the results of a model above a person, where perhaps the suggestion of the AI machine goes against the gut of the owner. It's like, well, that may be the real one for you. And I'm just thinking about that possibility because, a lot of these baseball owners don't really have, I don't know, they're just not good managers, managing people and their own strategy and stuff. And I'm just thinking, Not even thinking about like
Yeah,
just
well, Billy
talking
Beane's
out loud.
Moneyball was exactly that, right? He was really the first person to use the Oakland A's a lot of analytics, and a lot of it was homegrown analytics, and but it did go against the grain of what a lot of people thought was conventional wisdom in it. Now, the Oakland A's never won a World Series, but they were sure competitive for a long time. Bill James the same way. People lived and died by his stats and stuff,
Yeah,
and so
sabermetrics.
yeah, same. Another one, and even over the course of our lifetime of being a baseball fan, we use WAR now to calculate in the OPS, things like that as data points to understand players' value. Well, those didn't exist 20 years ago, right? We were looking at OBP and things like that, and so a lot of these are new metrics, and we continue to come up with new ways to refine things. And so, I do think it's an interesting question you pose, though, that if you wind up with a data point that's so, or a recommendation that's so skewed or off the wall, do you trust it? And I suppose if it all comes down to if it's right or not, it's a little bit like in our personal lives. I don't know if you remember the early days of Google Maps and Waze and things. I'd be driving, it would give me a recommendation to get off the highway, and I'd be, oh, it's crazy, I'm not doing that, right? And then you stay on the highway like, oh, I really should have gotten off the highway, right? Because lo and behold, there's a traffic jam up ahead or something. And so, but now we trust them implicitly, and I don't know if that's a good thing or not, right?
I thought you were gonna. I thought you were
Yeah.
gonna mention the times where you hear where someone follows the road and it ends up like
Oh,
they're just in a farm pasture somewhere because
yeah.
for some reason it could the satellites or whatever couldn't read the road. But
Yeah. Well, that happened to Michael Scott in The Office, right? He drove into a lake because the computer told him to. So,
one of the things that I think people don't realize is just the amount of tremendous amount of energy that the machine learning, the software, the computers require to do the magic of AI. And this is just a theoretical question. It's like, would baseball clubs be in a position to be like, we're going to both be, because right now, everything right now in baseball is a real estate play. Everyone wants to own their own stadium and then build out around it,
yeah.
like the Battery in Atlanta or the Wrigley Field. They're starting to, the Ricks family starting to do that, where they want to have the gambling site outside, the restaurants, the bars. Would there be a way for them to be like, we're going to try to be responsible stewards of your information and the amount of energy it takes to run these things? Is there even a possibility for baseball clubs or any company to be like, we're going to go and build a million solar panels in the middle of nowhere to help run this?
Yeah, perhaps. I do think baseball does partner in a lot of those ways. In fact, if you look at every stadium, there's a private Google Cloud in the stadium that's doing all the StatCast information. And so they rely heavily on the technology partners. If you talk to most of the major league CIOs, they'll tell you that they're not technologists, right? They are by trade, but what they know is baseball operations, and they rely heavily on their partners, companies like Google, Extreme Networks, Cisco Systems, Oracle, HPE, companies like that, to help them make those decisions better. And so I suspect that if they were to, I do think, down the road, you might see them partner with, a solar company or something, wind farm, something like that for better power. In fact, Microsoft just announced they're going to reopen 3 Mile Island, right, for nuclear. And so I could see, maybe the New York Islanders down the road having their power driven off of that. There are some interesting ways that you can, what I would like to see is when future stadiums are being built, to have sustainability and power in mind. And I'll give you an example. So Climate Pledge Arena, which was named by Amazon Web Services or the Seattle Kraken play, they designed sustainability into that stadium. So for instance, when rainwater comes off the roof there, because it rains a lot in Seattle, it's collected into a cistern, and they use that to Zamboni the ice, right? So they're not pulling water out, right? They use a lot of plant-based food, so all food sourced within 300 miles. They give free public transit to anybody going to a game if you got a ticket to the game, right? So they're kind of giving back that way. And so there are ways, I think, that stadium owners and Major League Baseball team owners can contribute to the greater good and sustainability in partnership with the city, with local food manufacturers, and thinking outside the box is a way of doing that. I did talk to another team that had just built an arena a couple of years ago about what the Kraken had done, and they had said, well, it's not really our demographic. I said, well, I'm not sure you do it for marketing purposes. You do it because it's the right thing to do, right? So I won't call them up by name because I don't want to embarrass them. But I do think a lot of what's done by owners is driven by money, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I do think there's still a PR side to it as well.
I love that part about what you had mentioned, the Seattle Kraken, the NHL team with the public transportation, because that's when I think of a good stadium to go to, whether it's basketball, football, baseball. I look at how am I going to get there? Obviously, it's
Yeah,
easier in some of the more older cities in the American sense of Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, Boston, where you can take the light rail, you can take a subway or metro, and DC is the same thing. But in places like Lone Depot Park in Miami, there's one bus that runs in front of it, and
yeah,
there's a couple of buses that run like 5 blocks away, and these are big Miami blocks. These aren't your traditional Northeast blocks.
yeah.
And
Or
I
Arlington or Globe Life,
are
right? I mean, that's
exactly
so far
Texas.
outside Dallas. Yeah,
By the way, the worst airport I've ever flown out of, the Dallas.
DFW.
Yes, the worst. I mean, you can't even walk in between the terminals. You have to wait for that little shuttle to come
The
on, and
train,
it's like
yeah.
a 10 minute. It's like 10 minutes between. It's like I understand you guys. You have all the land in the world, but make better use of it. Well, anyways, public transportation. Yes, I'm all for it, and I hope that AI helps cities also tell the city commissioners, the mayors, whoever, we need better public transportation. But
I'd actually like to see the cities invest more in smart city infrastructure and do that with the stadium owners. I'll give you an example. In Dubai, everything's connected there, and so if you're waiting for public transportation, and they've done this because it's so hot, there's an app you can go to, and it'll tell you exactly how many stops away the bus is and exactly how many minutes. And so you're not having to, you can time everything much better. We're here, I don't know, it seems like in the US, half the public transportation systems are always running behind. You have no idea. And so people don't use it because it's unreliable, right? But if more of it was connected and you knew exactly when it would be there, what train you should take. I'll give you an example in Boston, one of my homes is if you see a Celtics or Bruins game, that's also the train station, North Station. And they just started doing this a few years ago, but they'll actually hold the last train until the game's over. But you used to have to decide, right? Am I going to leave early and catch this train or wait and then have it be 2 hours until the next one, right? So you really put the fan in a position where they have to like drive in. And I think anything they can do in partnership with the city to get people to use public transportation would be the right thing to do.
that's interesting because I remember parallel to this, like I had mentioned, there's a metro station half a block from the Nationals Park in Washington D.C. And for many years, a lot of fans did exactly what you had mentioned. They had to leave at, I think the last train was like at 10:30 or around 10, obviously around the seventh, eighth inning back then before the pitch clock, because the city would charge the Nationals if they wanted to extend the hours. And obviously, like you had said, a lot of baseball is about the bottom line.
Yeah.
They were like, no, we're not going to pay. Who knows how much they were charging them? But they only would pay the extended hours if it was like the playoffs. And this was obviously in the time of like Trey Turner, Bryce Harper back in the just in the last decade. But it's awful that there's that
No,
choice
that's
you have to
idiotic.
make. It's like
Yeah.
I'm not getting my ROI on these tickets that I paid for to go see this game.
Yeah, no, you should almost penalize the person for driving if you want, right? Overcharge for parking and make public transportation free.
Earlier, you were working for your bosses at that time were asking for internet strategy. It's unbelievable. I had mentioned Minority Report came out 20 years ago, and we're living through it now. And technology, it's like a fever dream. Eventually, it's gonna come true. What's something that you think that not yet, but how is technology going to change us just in when you do your daydreaming or whatever of like because you've been in this for so long and where we are is just mind boggling if you go back to someone like 1990.
Yeah, I think it's the combination of artificial intelligence and mixed mode reality. I think I've sat in the stands and go, my grandmother could hit that and things like that, right? And my kids skate faster than you do, that sort of thing. We're getting to the point where I think within the next couple of years, you'll be able to you can already do this with a couple of sports, right? Where you put a headset on though, and you'll be able to experience the action as the player sees it. So if you really think that your grandmother or can hit a fastball, stand up at the plate and see what that's like and see what it's like coming over the plate. And I think last year MLB did experiment with metaverse. They put a couple of games in the metaverse, and what they did was you went into this virtual interface and they would replay. I think the first one was Texas Rangers and Anaheim Angels, and they would as the game was going on, they'd rebroadcast it in this virtual environment. And so you could move around the park, though. You could go to center field, you go to home plate, things like that. But it's still kind of a recreation. I think you will actually get to experience what the game is like from every position on the field, every tee box, every standing in net, seeing slap shots come over your shoulder, things like that. And that's pretty
Getting a
exciting.
beer poured on you because the opposing
Yeah.
fans are mad that their team
Actually, one of the
gave up a
reasons
home
why
run.
MLB did that was they did want people to be able to interact with other fans too. So you could log in and you couldn't speak to the person, but you could text them, the person sitting beside you through a chat interface, and find out where they're from and who their favorite player is. And so you can interact with them like you would at a ballpark. And I
Like
think
in the good
anything,
old days of AOL chat, those first
yeah,
days,
yeah.
coffee room 1, coffee room 2.
Or the good old days when people talk to each other at parks instead of staring at their phones. But
True.
the phone has clearly become an integrated part of the experience, though, right? I think that's Daniel Brusilowski is the CEO of the Golden State the Golden State Warriors here in San Francisco said, they want their fans to be hyper connected, right? Totally immersed in the game. So you're watching the game, you're texting your buddies, you're scanning QR codes up on the screen, you're watching highlights, and everything that's going on is coming to you visually on like through your eyes on the scoreboard and through your mobile phone. And that's baseball is a bit of a different approach, right? Because it's a lot slower moving game,
Right.
but both are valid. But clearly the phone's an integral part of the experience now. So
Absolutely. Yeah. I can't imagine. Yeah. I can't imagine what humans are going to be like with the phone after an entire lifetime, which some kids are growing up now only knowing the
one of the
phone.
things it can do though is it can close the gap between the TV experience and the in-stadium experience, because a lot of people would tell you for a lot of sports, especially football, watching on TV is better, right? Because if you're sitting in the 300 level and you see a running back plow into the line, did he really cross it? I don't know, right? But on
Yeah.
TV
You're
you
right
can
there.
see
You're
that.
just sitting right
So
next to God and
yeah.
you're asking him, hey, Lord, what happened there?
So what if you could hold your phone up though over the stadium? And I know NFL's been trying to work on this, and then put it over that spot, and then it would superimpose the first down line and show you where the ball is, right? Now you're getting a lot more intelligence. Or if you could put the phone over top of a player, right? And so, even in baseball, let's say I want to know what Shohei Ohtani's stats are for the game. I highlight it, and through an augmented reality interface, it tells me, he went 6 for 6 with 10 RBIs and, 3 home runs and, 3 stolen bases like he did in that one game, right?
That's so funny. It reminds me of those early video games from like 20 years ago where the characters had that like white cloud above them as they're walking down the street. So it kind
Yeah.
of be like baseball players doing that way. I want to
Yeah.
ask,
But anything to get more information, right?
of course,
Yeah.
with your background, you're a baseball fan, you're huge into tech. If we were to take you away and make you the new general manager of the Boston Red Sox, what's one or two things that general manager Kerravala would do with his powers?
I'd start spending money again. There's no way they shouldn't have been on the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes. They shouldn't have let
Reach.
Mookie Betts go. But I think they have to realize that from a fan perspective, there's only so much experience you can bring in stadium. And I will say that the John Henry Group has done a great job. Brian Shielder, the CIO, of having a fabulous technology experience in stadium. And so there's nothing wrong with the fan experience. I would like to see more advancements in kind of mobile phone integration with the one thing with baseball, unlike other sports, is MLB centralizes a lot of the control over what you can do and what you can't. And so I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but if you go to a concert at a major league ballpark, the tickets come to you in the ballpark app. Or if you go to a concert in a NHL arena, it comes to you in the arena app, right? And so that's because baseball wants that centralized control. And so from a GM perspective, I would again, just certainly start spending the money. Rely heavily on analytics to figure out how to do that, but they got to get some first class players back there.
I'm going to push back on what you had said about John Henry. I think he did the operative word being past tense, because his eyes just completely off the ball. I mean, bad pun, but no, bad pun. I didn't mean to say it, but he's so distracted because now he's part of the ownership group, I believe, of the Pittsburgh Penguins. He obviously very famously owns either majority or a substantial stake in Liverpool Football Club in the English Premier
Yeah.
League. And I know a handful of other sports, and who knows what other private equity things he has in. And this is more of like, just don't lose money because I'm focused on this over here. And so he's taking away. I'm not a Boston Red Sox fan, and I'm looking forward to going Boston in April when I think it's no in May or April when the Atlanta Braves go play there. But as a baseball fan, I think it's good when the Boston Red Sox are actually relevant versus a team with the revenue of the Boston Red Sox should not be missing the playoffs. What, like 2 of the last 3 years or whatever? It doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to me.
And really, they were relying on every player having a miraculous season to make the playoffs. And so I don't know if that's totally true that the ownership of other sports distracts them. I've talked to the CIO of the Sox about that, and he's never said that had a meeting and said we're going to take resources away from you and give them to
Well, I
the
mean, you
Penguins.
wouldn't say that about your boss, though.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. But I do think that the focus of win at all costs has changed there. And I think they did get burned in some cases, right? The Pablo Sandoval contract was a bad one, things like that, and even David Price didn't really work out.
Oh
Chris
God,
Sale,
no. Yeah.
right? So, I mean, they won one in there, but I do think part of it is maintaining a philosophy. Like Dombrowski came in for the farm system of part, but he won. He's doing the same in Philly now, right? So the Dombrowski method works, but then they ran him out of town. So, and with Theo was build the farm system, and so pick a path, just and let it build from there. You can't keep changing paths. And Chaim Bloom, very much tried to rebuild the farm system, but he tried to do it the Tampa way. We've got a lot more money than Tampa, so there's no reason why we should have been doing it that way. But I agree with you in principle that a team with the revenue stream and the eyeballs on it that the Boston Red Sox have should always be a perennial playoff contender. And it is good for baseball. If you've looked at studies across all leagues, when the marquee teams are doing well, those rivalries, Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers, Giants, Bruins, Canadians, right? Things like that. Lakers, Celtics, when those teams are good, everybody's interested, right? And because the worst thing for a league is to have, no offense to the small market teams, but if you have two small market teams in your championship game, there's a lot less eyeballs on it, right? And which is less money for everybody. So
Yeah, it's the hardcore fans are going to watch those championship
yeah.
towns with the small market teams.
Yeah.
But before we let you go, for all of us, and specifically for me, what I mentioned, I want to go see the Braves when they're in Boston next year. What is a good local place that you like going to for coffee, beer, food in the Acton area, which is just outside of Boston, in your mind?
Well, in Acton, which is 25 miles outside of it, there's a great little microbrewery. They make their own beer called True West. They got a lot of TVs in there. The only downside it has is though it's owned by a big Buffalo Sabres fan, so everything there's Buffalo. So, which is a dirty word in the Boston area. If you're in the Boston area itself, the entire Fenway area, Game On, Cask and Flag, and they're all tremendous places. You can go in there and you can watch the games. And you can just immerse yourself in the atmosphere of the Fenway area. I think to your point of more and more teams building out the areas that are around the park, the John Henry Group, if they've done one thing great, it's fantastic, right? From the new MGM Arena to all the restaurants and things. They shut down the David Ortiz Way, which used to be the Yawkey Way, which they renamed. All that entire area during game day is just bubbling with energy. It's a great experience. In fact, even if you're not going to a game, I would say go there and just enjoy the experience of being in the Fenway area.
I love it. Zeus, I want to thank you for your time. Let us know where we can read any of your research or just follow you on social media if you want to share any of that with us.
Yeah, no, go to zkresearch.com. You can also follow my Twitter handle. It's at Zeus Kerravala. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Instagram. You'll see a lot of pictures from different ballparks around the league, and you'll get a good idea of a lot of the advanced tech coming in sports, because that intersection of sports and tech is something that I love, and I think it's something that all of us that are fans want more of.
My very last question, bonus round. What does your fancy AI machine say about who's going to win the World Series this year?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I haven't asked it that, but I would suspect that the Dodgers would be an odds-on favorite. I'll sit here and tell you I am not a Dodger fan, although I'm a big Shohei Ohtani fan, so I'd like to see him get a ring. But I guess maybe I'm not a fan isn't the right word. I'm jealous. I suppose that they went out and got all those great players, and so if I were to pick a dark horse that I want to see win, I think the San Diego Padres would be great. They've been knocking, they've got a great team. Ray Shannon, the CIO, they do a great job with that organization. Petco Park is a fabulous experience if you've never been. And so if I'm pulling for one team now that's not one of my hometown teams, it would be the San Diego Padres.
Thanks to Zeus for joining us this week. In honor of artificial intelligence and the state of Massachusetts, I'm drinking a beer. I know I've told you I'm getting off of beers, and I am, but I only have a couple of beers left, and I'm going to use them for the podcast because, again, I'm trying to get the belly to go down. In my hand, or not really in my hand, in my belly, there's most of Blood Orange Wheat, which is a Radler. I have no idea what a Radler is, but the beer is called Blood Orange Wheat from a good American local brewery called Jack's Abbey Craft Lagers in Framingham, Massachusetts. Or is it Framingham? Maybe I should have asked artificial intelligence or my 100 interns here at the podcast. Maybe AI is telling you to subscribe and like the podcast, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and check out the podcast t-shirt store. But maybe you don't want to pay attention to AI, and that's fine. Thanks for listening to Last Call Baseball. Be great and get home safe.